Good evening and welcome. You're watching the big story on NDTV Profit and I'm Nupur Talwar Suri. Well, in an attempt to fight rising prices of onions, the centre has decided to send about 1,600 metric tons of onions to the northern states where the prices have been quite high. Now, this attempt, of course, has brought down the prices of onions in the mandis in Delhi to about 45 rupees a kg, anticipating the supply to come in soon. However, in Mumbai, the prices still stay at a stubborn 120 rupees a kg. On the big story tonight, we examine the consequences of this price rise of onion and other staples that we are seeing and the effects that it is bringing about. Well, first we go across to our correspondents on the ground who have sent us reports from various states. First up, of course, is Shreya, who is reporting from New Delhi.
The centre has decided to send 1,600 tons of onions to the northern regions to address the rising prices of onions in the state. So I'm joined by a vendor right here. Sir, आप बताइए अभी कांदे का दाम कितना है और इस महीने से ज़्यादा बढ़ गया कि पिछले महीने से ही बढ़ गया था दाम?
नहीं, पिछले महीने में थोड़ा कम था। पिछले महीने में 40 रुपये 35 रुपये किलो प्याज था। अब जो है 45 से 50 का प्याज बिक रहा है और उससे ऊंची क्वालिटी लोगे तो थोड़ा और फालतू लगेगा। बाकी प्याज कम होने की वजह से जो प्याज में जो शॉर्टिंग है, क्योंकि फसल और कोई है नहीं, इस मारे जो प्याज महंगा है और पहले की तरह जो सेल नहीं हो पा रही, कम ग्राहक भी जो कम है। जो पहले प्याज 20 किलो ले आते थे वो 10 किलो ले आते, जो 10 किलो ले आने वाले वो 5 किलो ले आ रहे। घर का जो घर में जो काम आती है प्याज वो भी सोच समझ के प्याज ले रहे हैं, क्योंकि 50-60 रुपये किलो बहुत महंगा होता है प्याज।
तो अभी तो फेस्टिविटी का टाइम है, आगे दिवाली आ रहे हैं, अभी तो लोग ज़्यादा ख़रीदने का वो उनका टेंडेंसी रहता है। टमाटर, कांदे, ये सब वेजिटेबल्स बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रहता है किचन के लिए। और इस टाइम पे जो इसका दाम बढ़ा दिया है इतना ज़्यादा, आपको लगता है बिजनेसेस में भी अफेक्ट हो रहा है? थोड़ा कम लोग ख़रीदने आ रहे हैं, सोच समझ के ख़रीद रहे हैं?
ऐसा होता है, थोड़ा त्योहार भी होता है, थोड़ा महंगा हो जाता है, क्योंकि सब खरीदारी करते हैं, खाना पीना सब करते हैं, थोड़ा सा ज़्यादा बिक्री हो जाता है, तो इसलिए त्योहार में और 10-5 रुपये महंगा हो सकता है।
तो आपका कोई उतना घाटा नहीं हो रहा?
नहीं, हम तो मजदूर आदमी, हम तो जैसा आएगा ऐसा बिकेगा। हम तो डेली खरीदते हैं, डेली बेचते हैं। 20 कट्टे लाते हैं, 20 कट्टे डेली बेच देते हैं, डेली लाते हैं। जैसा आता है ऐसा बिकता है हमारा। तो माज़ाखोर इंसान है, मजदूर है हम तो। जो बड़े बड़े लोग हैं, बड़े बड़े खरीदार हैं, व्यापारी, उनका नफा और घाटा होता है। हम तो डेली लाते हैं, डेली बेचते हैं।
और आपको क्या लगता है इसका दाम फिर से घट जाएगा बाय द एंड ऑफ दिस मंथ? कम हो जाएगा?
नहीं, जो है वो ही रहेगा। कम हो सकता है, इससे ज़्यादा नहीं होगा।
All right, let's now also go across to Yash Tiwari, who's reporting from a mandi in Mumbai to get a sense of the prices there.
Prices of onion and tomato have shot up ahead of the festive season. A special train locally known as the Kanda or the Onion Express is scheduled to leave for Delhi from Nashik. The plan is the government wants to sell onions at a subsidized rate of 35 rupees per kg in Delhi. But the people of Maharashtra are asking, what about us?
लोकल बाजार में अगर आप पकड़ोगे तो 70-80 kg है, और अगर होलसेल में लोगे तो वो 60 रुपया kg पड़ेगा।
कोई 60 बेच रहा है, कोई 80 बेच रहा है, कोई 40 बेच रहा है, कोई क्वालिटी के हिसाब से बेच रहा है। बड़ा टमाटर 80 भी बिक रहा है, उससे छोटा 60, फिर 40।
इसका कारण ऐसा है कि अभी नई फसल आने का है और जूना जो कांदा है वो प्याज है वो ये हो गया, शॉर्टेज हो गया मार्केट में, उसके वजह से रेट हाई हो गया।
And let's also now go across to Nilesh Wagh. He's joining us from Nashik and he's tracking the supplies, in fact, that are being sent to the northern states.
केंद्र सरकार के नाफेड और एनसीसी की तरफ से खरीदी किया हुआ प्याज जो है वो दिल्ली के लिए रवाना हो चुका है। नासिक के कस्बे सुखाने रेलवे स्टेशन से स्पेशल ट्रेन द्वारा ये प्याज जो है वो दिल्ली के किसानगंज स्टेशन के लिए रवाना हो चुका है। दिल्ली के लोगों के लिए प्याज के दामों में राहत मिले, इसके चलते ये प्याज जो है वो रेलवे केंद्र सरकार की वाणिज्य मंत्रालय और ग्राहक संरक्षण मंत्रालय की ओर से ये प्याज खरीदी किया था। नासिक के विविध मंडियों से प्याज खरीद किया था। उसके चलते लोगों को राहत मिले, ये ऐसी एक भावना थी। लेकिन दूसरी ओर देखा जाए तो जो प्याज किसान से जो प्याज खरीदी किया था वो अच्छा क्वालिटी का प्याज जो है वो खरीदी किया गया था। लेकिन जब ये प्याज जो भेजा है वो नीची परत वाला प्याज भेजा गया है, ऐसा आरोप अभी किसान की ओर से हो रहा है। और दूसरी तरफ अपन देखा जाए तो प्याज के दाम नियंत्रण में रखने के लिए ये प्याज खरीदी किया गया था। 29 रुपये प्रति केजी से रेट से ये प्याज खरीद किया था। लेकिन यहाँ अगर देखा जाए तो वही प्याज जो है वो 40 से 50 की रेट में यहाँ पे बेचा जा रहा है। इसके चलते केंद्र सरकार की नाफेड और एनसीसी जो एजेंसी है वो भारी मुनाफा भी यहाँ पे कमाते हुए देखते मिले।
Well, this now brings us to the three big questions we are asking. Delhi gets subsidized onions. When will it be Maharashtra's turns? The next big question, of course, how sensitive is politics to onion prices ahead of Diwali? And finally, the third one that we'll be examining this evening is why is food inflation stubbornly high? And to discuss this, we are now joined by Sandeep Shastri. He's a political analyst, and Dheeraj Neem. He's an economist and FX strategist at ANZ Research. Good evening, all three of you. We'll go across to Mr. Holkar a little later. But at this point in time, Mr. Shastri, what we are looking at is the government reacting to these stubbornly high prices. And we all know that in India, we have often seen politics being affected by the prices of onions. In fact, many a government have, cried bitter tears over it. So what do you make of this latest move that's come in by the central government?
You are very right in saying that onions has brought tears to the eyes of several political parties in the past, and elections have been won and more often lost on the whole question of rising onion prices. And especially close to a festival and close to two important state elections, this is something which I think both center and state governments will be watching very closely, because linking it to another point, in most surveys done across the country, among the top three issues that people state as their biggest problems, price rise is invariably one of those three. And I'm talking of this for the last 20 years. So I think political parties would be very wary of its impact, especially those in power would be much more wary of the impact, because you are giving a political weapon to the opposition to beat you with. And therefore, I'm sure there would be measures which both central and state governments would want to take on a war footing to be able to ensure that the more and more you peel the onion, it is not that the more and more the tears that emerge, but more and more the smile that should emerge because of the fall in the prices of onions, because a rise in the price of onions is never good news for political parties, especially when a festival is around the corner and an election is around the corner.
All right. Dheeraj, food inflation has been quite a sticky topic, and vegetable prices, in fact, have gone up about 36% year on year. Onions and tomatoes continue to remain the pain point. We have seen them, going up to 120 bucks in retail per kg. So what is it that's, the reason behind this? We do know that we've had unseasonal rains, but it seems to be a recurring problem now.
Well, to be honest, Nupur, I don't think I have an answer that explains completely why do we have food prices sort of setting at a structurally higher level in the recent months or recent quarters. But there seems to be a combination of factors that should be behind it, including elements of unseasonal rain and more weather disruptions, which have become quite frequent given climate change and all of those things. I think, the disruption to food supply has become more of a recurrent phenomenon. More than, the overall rainfall during the southwest monsoon, it has become more important, how equally distributed or how well distributed that rainfall is. And when the monsoon is retreating, it's not causing a situation of glut in several areas like it did this time in several southern states where it's hurt production of food crop, etc. So I think a whole lot of problems related to weather are behind it. And of course, the other problems which are structural in nature for the Indian economy, in the sense that we do not have great infrastructure as far as storage, warehousing, and transportation of agricultural produce is concerned. So I think all of those problems are coming to bite us, and now it's been a while that food inflation has remained so high, and it's become not only an economic concern but perhaps even a political concern, as you've highlighted before. I think these measures are very welcome.
Right, Dheeraj, also India is, the second largest onion growing country in the world. We do export it to several countries like Bangladesh. But each and every year, we find ourselves talking about this. So obviously, as you pointed out, that there are perhaps more structural issues involved, because we seem to be reacting to the rise rather than anticipating it.
Well, I think a part of the problem is that we can't anticipate most of this rise because, we don't know how weather reacts or how weather events unfold. And therefore, most of the time, we're just playing a catch-up game once the fact has occurred. And I do personally think that this is very much a public policy problem, and at the moment is sort of constricting the hands of monetary policy as well. But having said that, I think the solution lies not in probably just alleviating these temporary spikes by ensuring, mandi arrivals in several parts of the country are smoothed out. But at the same time, we need to be investing in our capacities for the longer term solution while we are facing challenges like climate change.
Right. Mr. Shastri, politically, of course, it's going to be very, very touchy in Maharashtra as well. The state goes to polls. Nasik, of course, is one of the bigger, the larger areas where we see onions grown. And across Maharashtra, the prices continue to be very, very sticky. What's your sense of how this could play out in the near future?
Nupurji, 2 points on this. Undoubtedly, price rise is an issue on the minds of the voter. And especially when it comes to something you are consuming daily, it becomes an even more critical issue. But I think as a political observer, the question I would like to raise is, while the voter sees the price rise around, who does she think has a better solution to the problem? Sometimes you believe that the party in power is the one which is the best suited to solve the problem, whereas at other times you think that those who are in the opposition may do a much better job. So it may be wrong to assume that a price rise only impacts on, negatively impacts on the party in power. It's actually much more dependent on the perception of the voter as to who she or he thinks is better suited to be able to solve a problem. Because at times we have seen, even though there has been a price rise, and even though there has been a party in power for a long period of time, that party is voted back to power. Because the voter thinks, the voter has a perception that that party is more capable of being able to solve the problem than the party which is reigned against it. So I think that's the issue that will come up in Maharashtra possibly during the election campaign, as to if this were to continue to be an issue, both the ruling and the opposition would try to ensure that they do not get the blame for what is happening with regard to the prices of essential commodities.
So essentially, you do see a bit of a tug of war between the two sides. Who do you blame for this mess? Because, when prices of onions and tomatoes and potatoes and, the staples that we use every day go up to these levels, leave, people from lower stratas, people from the middle income groups are also hit hard. And we've done this comparative analysis of, how a mandi versus, e-com sites like a Zepto or a Big Basket are selling it, and we do see that there has been a subsequent increase that we have seen since the past year.
You are right, Nupur. I think it ultimately depends on when that voter is standing in front of the electronic voting machine to vote. Is he or she thinking about the price rise, or is he or she thinking of some other issues which is important at a given point of time? Because this is a huge dilemma for a lot of us political analysts, that if voters are concerned about the price rise, then that should reflect in their voting decision. But very often the voting decision is a byproduct of some other possibly emotional or political factor which impacts them much more than the price rise. So at the end of the day, when the voter is staring at the EVM and looking at the various buttons, what is working in their mind in deciding as to which button they should press? It need not be only the tears that are caused by the onion.
Right, I like that point that you make. So you are saying that the issues that we've had in the past, like inflation, like price rise, perhaps are no longer affecting how the voter is thinking. So in a sense, you are reducing some bit of the anti-incumbency there. Is that what you seem to be looking at? Not totally, but in terms of these two things.
No, Nupur, I'm not saying for a moment that price rise, especially of essential commodities, does not impact on the way they vote. I say when voting, there are a basket of factors.
Okay.
And in that basket of factors, what is my perception as a voter as to which is the most important factor for me? Is it emotional issues? Is it political issues? Is it a candidate? Is it a leader? Or is it the price of commodities? So I think among all these issues which compete, ultimately I as a voter take a decision as to which one do I give primacy to.
Oh yes, absolutely. So that's an interesting point that you make, and of course voters always keep us all guessing. Everything in the past seems to have failed, at least opinion polls so far seem to have failed on what works. Dheeraj, you made an interesting point earlier about climate change and the fact that we are still not being able to understand how this could impact us in the future. And how do we deal with it? So give us a sense of what you make of it.
Look, I think it's a change one has to reckon with, not just domestically, but globally. And this is, on top of various other issues, which include geopolitical risks and wars and all of that have upended global supply chains, including of food items in the past. So in a world which is geo-fragmented and at the same time, facing the challenges of climate change, etc., I think there is significant scope of investments as far as making the economies more resilient to these changes is concerned. And I think India, as the most populous country on the face of earth, a very large consumer of food items is concerned, these changes and these steps become even more pressing. So I personally think that these developments have far-reaching consequences, not only on the political cycles as you're discussing, but also on the short and the medium-term economic cycles. Most importantly, and we are seeing that happen in the economy right now, they could tie the hands of the central banks into keeping the policy rates elevated, because they have to continuously battle high food inflation, which they actually cannot influence by the monetary policy tools. Nevertheless, they are legislated to target inflation, headline inflation. So I think that to find out solutions to these problems, it has to be an ongoing effort. And there is no other way around it than to put it now.
All right. Mr. Shastri as well as Dheeraj, thank you both very much for joining in this evening on The Big Story and taking us through the implications of the sticky prices that we are seeing. Well, in fact, food inflation has hit Indian households hard, and a local circle survey has found that 29% of Indian households surveyed say that they have reduced the consumption of essential and green vegetables to cope with the price rise in the last few months. And joining us for more on this is Sachin Thiparia. He's the founder of Local Circles. Hi, Sachin. Always good to have you on the show. Sachin, take us through what the big points that have come out from your survey are.
So we've done a national survey, Nupur, which has gotten, over 40,000 responses from length and breadth of the country, over 350 districts. And, two key findings. The first one is on the squeeze that many households are experiencing now due to high vegetable prices. And the survey found that 29% households basically have started cutting on consumption of green vegetables and essentials, which is your potato, onion, and tomato. And, another 29% are actually buying better. So they are, if they were buying in the retail market, they are probably going to the mandis to buy more efficiently. And then about 42% essentially across the country are just paying higher, having no option, consuming the same amount, but just paying higher. So, a deeper hole in the pocket. So that was the first finding. The second finding was around, what is it that they are paying on for tomatoes, onions, and potatoes. And it turns out that, over 56% of households are paying, who are buying tomatoes, are paying over 75 rupees a kg now. They're paying over 50 rupees a kg for onions and over 40 rupees a kg for potatoes. Another 29% are paying somewhere between 50 and 75 for tomatoes, 40 to 50 for onions, and 30 to 40 for potatoes. And these are commodities where typically the prices are somewhere around in the 30 rupees a kg range. And at this time, it's only about 6% of the Indian households that are able to buy these commodities at that price, largely, probably because they are in those zones where these commodities are grown, or these fresh items are grown. So essentially what is happening is 85% of the households are facing this squeeze where they are essentially paying high prices. And the big question that is being asked by the common consumer is that, this has been happening year after year, since 2020 was the first time Local Circles did this survey. And this is the fourth year where we are seeing these high prices come September and October. So the big question is, why isn't the government planning this more effectively and on a more timely basis? So that way, when these prices surge, there is already, mechanisms that are deployed, and these prices are controlled and kept within a certain range. So that's kind of where we are. We don't know how high the tomato will go. Last year, it went up to nearly 200 rupees a kg. And if that happens, I think it'll just only increase the squeeze further.
Absolutely. So essentially what you're saying is that consumers feel that the government is just reactionary to this inflation that's hitting them hard. But also the other side, Sachin, has been that inflation has been somewhat stubborn, and we haven't been able to essentially get a fix on it. But what I found very interesting, Sachin, in your survey was that 29% of the people actually say that they are looking for different sources of these staples. That's quite a number, that something that you consume regularly, you need to go looking for it to different areas to find and to make sure that you get the lowest prices.
No, absolutely. And, one classic case is, the government has, in the reactionary mode, taken some steps. So for instance, if you live in Delhi, there are some of these NCCF stalls that you can go to who would sell onion and tomatoes to you at subsidized prices. So essentially, if you go in the local market, you're getting it at 120 a kg. But if you go to one of these trucks, which are, of course, hard to find, it's time versus money. People don't want to stand in line. lines, but if they actually do take the effort of going and standing in line and spending time, then in that case, they can buy some of these commodities instead of at 120 for tomato for about 60 rupees a kg. So people are basically seeking those avenues, which also indicates that, they are willing to go the extra mile to be able to spend less and still buy the same quantities instead of cutting back. So again, another indicator of squeeze there, Nupur.
Yes, absolutely. Sachin, thank you very much, as always, for joining us on The Big Story this evening.
It's good to be here.
Well, that's all we have time for on The Big Story this evening. Thank you very much for joining in, and do stay tuned to NDTV Profit for more.